what I want to do this afternoon is talk about Scrum, which I know that yes, we've some of us, if not all, if not most people, should have completed the fundamentals of Scrum. Of course, in Scrum as a framework of the Agile methodology, I am very, very keen to make sure that this the Agile methodology is a part of our is a core part of the fabric of our organization and our operations. And apart from just from a business perspective, most importantly from the angle of the individuals and the interactions and the collaboration and how we sort of work, the mindset. So this is not about like operations or processes or whatever. It's about the way we generally think as individuals, the way we approach our work, the way we consistently seek ways to make things better. So you would find that this is something I'm really, really passionate about. And I really want to make sure that we never divert away from this conversation. So today, I've just gone to dig some of my old materials, and I'm going to be talking about this Scrum framework, but in a slightly different format, because towards the end of this conversation, hopefully in the next few minutes, I will have some questions that I would expect all of us to get involved with and talk about and also try and figure things out. But let me first of all set the pace or set the tone of the conversation today. The second thing I need to mention is that this virtual learning and development sessions will start rotating this for other members of the team to have the opportunity to share, discuss, and build capacity for growth, both from a personal perspective and also for us as an organization. Is something we're really, really keen on. So let me dive straight into the conversation this morning. So framework of Scrum. Now, many people or some of people misunderstand this. Now, Agile, we talked about Agile, I think, in one of these sessions. I don't know if we recorded it. If you can still find the recording, I will find it. But what I want to call out here is that Scrum is not Agile. Yeah. So Scrum is not does not equal to Agile. Agile is a framework. Agile is a methodology, right? It's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. It's not really a thing, because if you go to many organizations and many companies in the private sector and public sector all over the world, some of them I've consulted with, some of them have coached and trained people who are working or who have worked there. What you find is a lot of people easily fall into the trap of thinking that Agile is about having this process, having that process, having that documentation, having that procedure in place. No, Agile is not that at all. Agile is just a methodology. It's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. Yeah, it comes with some ethos, which we've many times in this team we've talked about, and I really want us to keep talking about it, because the more we talk about these things, the more they are top of mind, the more they impact our way to work, the more they affect and contribute to how we collaborate together. And I can see the results of those conversations, and I'm really keen to get more of those conversations going. Without you knowing it, you realize that you're doing things naturally in a very collaborative, very interactive, very engaging, very responsive manner, as opposed to reactive and follow procedure or processes straight to the letter and all that kind of stuff. That is not what the Agile Manifesto is. So Agile Manifesto is about how people work together. I mean, valuing the interactions of people working together more than processes. And it doesn't mean we should not have processes and tools, but they are just enablers for the things I want to achieve. What we want to achieve is collaboration, engagement, and progression, not even perfection, interestingly. Working software, customer collaboration, and flexibility to respond when things change. as opposed to sticking to one way. But I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We already know this, and we'll keep talking about this more. But let's talk about Scrum. Now, the reason why I'm talking about Scrum is because I find Scrum as the easiest way to get on the agile journey, if that makes sense. So it's easier to implement and understand Scrum. It doesn't mean that there are no other frameworks of agile that exist out there. So there's XP, which actually existed before Scrum. There is Kanban, which is actually very popular as well. I guess at some point in the future, we should talk about Kanban as a framework of Agile and kind of discuss what it looks like. You can YouTube or Google and you can learn more about these things. But Scrum is really popular because of its simplicity, because of the nimbleness of the fact that no matter the size of the team or the number of people or the organization or whatever it is you're trying, even at home, as basic as your food timetable, you could use Scrum. You could use Scrum as simple as trying to organize your party, organize an event, organize anything. It's applicable and easily understood, which is why you find that Scrum is really, really popular, and that explains it. But there are other ones. There are other scenarios where even Scrum would struggle. Scrum might not really fit in, and we'll see what I'm talking about in a moment. When you're trying to do things like, for example, to build a bridge, you can't easily have sprints of how to dig and how to do, there are projects that are way, way massive that you need beyond Scrum to be able to do them. But that's out of the context of our conversation this afternoon. Now, there are practices that we find in Agile, such as test-driven development, refactoring, behavior-driven development. We have not begun some of this. We don't get to do or hear or talk about them every day, but these are practices that we need, that I think everybody in our organization should be aware of, regardless of what you do, whether you do operations, whether you do human resources, whether you do marketing, or whether you even do software development. All these things, they should be top of mind, okay? And moving forward, there are core values of Agile that I think everyone should know about. One is courage, respect, openness, focus, and commitment. So I don't need to talk too much about it. I think those are quite self-explanatory. So I'll step forward. Now, there's something else here. If you look at this matrix that's been put together, it talks about two axes. One is the requirement axis, which is this is our goal, this is our desire, this is what we want to achieve, and the underlying technology to achieve those things. And also the degree of complexity, looking at, okay, this is what we know and what we don't know, meaning from what we know to what we don't know determines how much we do not know and the degree of complexity involved in what we are trying to achieve. And also that could grow to a point where you can see that it gets really chaotic, especially when there is no certainty and there's no clarity about what exactly it is we're trying to do. But the concept here is to think about it from the simple things, from the known stuff. Let's start with what we know and build on what we know gradually. And before you know it, even though you have complexities and complications and stuff on the horizons, but as much as you begin to build from the simple little stuff, the one you understand, the ones you are clear about, begin to build on those, you realize over time, with this consistency and practice, over time you begin to eat into the space that talks about complications, and even before you know it, complex problems become really simple and easily broken down. But these things come with constant and consistent practice and learning, which is where we have the idea of flexibility and being able to respond to it. Because the truth of the matter is, nobody, or ideally, it's hard to predict the future. It's really hard. You can't tell me now that what's going to happen in 6 months' time. I can give you an idea of the vision. I can give you an idea of the strategy or whatever, but that still doesn't mean that is not going to change next week. if there's a new regulation, there's a new law, or something happens, and we need to respond to that. Yeah. So that there's always complexity and complication and even chaos on the horizon. But the idea is to focus our minds on what we know and start from that simple journey or simple aspect of what we know and begin to build and scale from there. And this is how we develop services. This is how we build products. This is how we approach anything it is that we're doing, regardless of what it is, whether it's relating to software development, product development, or any tech stack, or even things that are non-technology related. It's the same knowledge, it's the same philosophy, the same ideology. If you think about it this way, two process models. The very defined one is, for example, you want to bake. Yeah, if you want to bake a cake, there are certain steps you have to go through, and if you jump any of those steps, or if you try to do 3 before 2, you're not going to get the result. The cake is not going to come out as cake. It might come out as cookies, if you know what I mean. So the defined process is you go through requirements, understand the problem space, understand the environment, understand the tools, the framework, whatever it is needed, and then you think about, okay, how do we design, or how do we code, how do we build, and then we test it and all that kind of stuff. But if you think about cooking, it's a different model entirely for cooking, because cooking is very empirical, and that is what we're talking about here. We are talking about the empirical model whereby you plan, you do, you check, you act. Yeah. And then when you act, you go back to the cycle again by planning, by doing, by checking and acting. Some of you can relate to this because you're already doing something similar to this in your day-to-day. But the idea is to think about it like cooking versus baking. Cooking means I could actually add my oil before I put the pepper, or before I put the rice in, before I put the seasoning, and it still comes out nice. Or I could actually put the seasoning first and then let me call the client. I don't know where my phone is, but it's kind of ringing. Yeah, so you could actually break down and not necessarily go through a defined process in the empirical model. Yeah. And of course, principle-wise, we're talking of prioritization, meaning as if you think about it, every time we do planning, we're actually prioritizing what problem are we focusing on next, what issue are we tackling next, and the more we do that on a daily basis or weekly or monthly, whatever basis, what we are doing is we are actually scaling our simplicity and burning away more complexity out of the way. And we're looking at empiricism emergence, meaning when new knowledge, new ideas, new principles, new regulations, when new things emerge, the ability to respond and adapt to them. And of course, collaboration, that can be overemphasized. And then time boxing, meaning we need to time our cycles, we need to time our experimental cycle, we need to time our period of working together so that we can measure and track our ability to respond and plan and make sure we're always focusing on the most important things or the most critical things at every point in time. And that creates a synergy effect of 1 + 1 = 3, because then your ability to produce way beyond your capacity or way beyond your abilities as an individual, because you're coming together as a force to tackle big or complex issues, you realize that you're actually achieving a lot more. Now, let's come down to Scrum. Now, Scrum has 3 roles. Yeah, 3 roles by the books. 3 roles by the books. I say by the books because if you find out in practice, it's usually beyond 3 roles. And I'll explain what it is. Yeah, 3 roles, meaning 1 Scrum Master, 1 Product Owner, and of course the team. So in the team, that's where you find everybody else, like the developers, the QA, business analyst, user researcher, UX designer, all the other people that contribute to the team. Yeah, but in essence, in practice, there's a Scrum Master who is the facilitator. There's a Product Owner who makes the decisions and makes the calls, and there's a team, of course. And the thing is this: bear in mind, these roles are not titles. There's one thing to have a role, and there's a different thing to have a title. Someone could be a designer or a developer or a business analyst and be doing the thing that a Scrum Master will do. That is the role, not the title. So don't confuse roles and titles together. I'm talking about the roles. The product owner, whoever makes the call about prioritization, about what we should do next, about moving things around and helping the team to make the best decision of what they should be working on, is acting in the role of the product owner, regardless of what their title is. Now, there are 5 key meetings: the daily Scrum, which most of us will do. Most of us dial into that. The planning, the review, the retro, and the backlog refinement. Well, we don't use grooming anymore. Backlog refinement. So, matter of fact, here. So, I'm going to share this material so you can have them. You don't need to take any notes, and the recording will be available to everybody. But the key thing is to understand the product backlog, the sprint burn down. What is the definition of done, and of course, what is our release burn up? Meaning, how much are we doing on a cycle by cycle basis? I will talk about these things in a second. Now, backlog refinement means, 1, before the beginning of a sprint. This is when we do this. Meaning, we look at the sprint, we look at our backlog in advance of the next sprint cycle and prepare user stories or tickets or work or whatever it is we want to do in advance. Okay, and in that exercise, what we do is we try and understand the requirements. We focus on trying to size them up if we can, which is what estimating is about. And also defining what exactly does done mean? What does this thing mean? What is the acceptance criteria? And creating that shared understanding between the team and the product owner, is really, really the core of this exercise, the backlog refinement. Sometimes we do this as part of planning. We do this before planning. We do this, but the exercise, this thing actually needs to happen. You would see there it talks about time, meaning for 2-week sprint, you probably need about 3 hours to do this. So, and who should come to this? Basically, anyone with the knowledge, and the entire team should be involved in this conversation. Okay, let's move on to the next exercise. Now, estimation is important, but I don't get to focus a lot on this because it can easily sidetrack, especially a young team or a team that's trying to find its rhythm and find its balance. But essentially, what it is, if you get to find yourself in a conversation somewhere or whatever it is, it is about making sure that we have a relative idea of efforts required to implement or deliver a set of requirements. Whether you want to publish something and you have an activity to maybe do a social media campaign, how much effort does it require? You could use Fibonacci, like you have on the screen. You can see 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. That's a Fibonacci series. Or you could even use days. You could use weeks. It doesn't really matter. What you use, what works for you. But essentially, this, I think, is what you do when you attain a level of maturity as an agile practice. Planning is where you do like your commitment to a sprint or to a cycle of iteration. You probably need, if you do a week sprint, you probably need 1 hour. I think that's the practice generally. First thing, you do it at the first thing during your sprint. You check that you have acceptance. Everything is well defined in your backlog and what you need to do for the sprint. You talk about your previous velocity, capacity, and any other things that will impact on your work, like leave, holidays, etc. And of course, you do planning. Second part. This is where you have a difference between, for example, you have design planning and development planning, but essentially you could do it together as one. You don't have to do it in separate sessions. But that's planning. The daily Scrum, I think we do this already. Are we on track? Stand up for the team. We've got a task board. Most of the time we need a task board to look through and say, this is what we're doing today. And every update you give during the stand-up should actually relate to the actual tasks on the Kanban, on the Jira board, or whatever it is that you use, if you use a physical board. Now, sprint burn down relates to the amount of work that we burn, meaning how much work is left for us to do. Burn up is essentially how much work are we doing? Are we building on what we've already done, and are we scaling up? Really? So it's just the opposite of burn up. So burn down is basically saying we have a backlog of 25 things, are we burning them down? I want to quickly get to the section where you have the quick Q&A, and then we can have a chat about those. Then I will know that everyone has actually done the Scrum Fundamentals training. The sprint review is where you basically show working software, which is what we call demo, or we call show and tell. Some of us already know what that is. And retrospective is how we talk about how do we work together as a team. Things like, what's causing us problem? What's causing us friction? Yeah. How safe are we? How collaborative are we? And sometimes, if the product owner is like, acting like a big brother or like a big elephant in the room, it doesn't have to come to retrospective. Yeah, it doesn't have to come to retrospective. I need to emphasize that. The retrospective has to be a safe space for the team to do their thing. And I think we've had to do that a couple of times on Meet Mentees, I think I remember. All right, the product backlog, of course, this is where you have like big things and broken down into small defined stuff. Okay, let's talk about, so there are a few artifacts here that I'm not going to spend time on. I think as we mature, we get into things like release planning, when we have a product to release and we have a service to release, going live, and release burn down exercise. Cross-functional stable size of a team is 5 people to 9 people working together and self-organizing. You could have different teams where you have distributed Scrum. And I think we're already getting to that point where we want to start we have different projects and then different teams doing their own thing. And there could be cross skilling or cross responsibilities and deliverables across those teams. So you could have a situation whereby all the teams have different skill sets mixed in the team, or focused skill sets or focused areas. So yeah, distributed Scrum is an interesting concept as well. Yeah, I like definition of done. So definition of done is basically saying what does done mean to us? Yeah, when do we say we have done this? Okay, and sometimes it's just as simple as before the work starts, the team agrees and writes like a charter to say this is what we mean when we say we are done, when our software is working or whatever. A list of things that the team kind of just lives by, and they review from time to time. And I think this is a practice that we should emulate in the team. All right. Yeah, we talked about it already. Yeah, I'm getting to the questions now. Okay, fantastic. So I would like everyone to unmute your microphones if you can, where you are is quiet. I want to touch about some of the questions that I've got in my material quickly. Some people wonder, okay, are you saying that in every project there's no project manager? Where is the project manager in this whole Agile and Scrum thing you're talking about? Does anybody want to say anything about that, or has anybody thought about that question? Please unmute yourselves and let's talk. I've finished my own part. I just want us to have a chat throughout the rest of the presentation now.
I feel like maybe the project managers, like jobs or tasks, are kind of split between the different Scrum members.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a lot of the stuff that the project manager would do that the product owner would do, but then there's also some of what the project manager would do that the Scrum Master would do. But then also, if the teams are self-organizing, then maybe the actual Scrum team would do some of those things as well.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's the last statement is the key part for me. I think it's about if the team are empowered enough to self-organize and help and collaborate, there's a degree of empowerment that allows the team to achieve things themselves without necessarily needing someone to tell them what to do and what not to do, if that makes sense. So yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, you're right that some responsibility or task of the traditional, what we call project manager, sort of distributed or decomposed into things like some of the things that the Scrum Master would do or the product owner would do. Yes. The second question says, can you combine any two roles in Scrum? I love that one.
I think so, because I think that like you can be part of the team and have like one role, but you can also be a Scrum Master, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. Yeah, and like I said, it's about understanding the difference between roles and titles. You see what I mean? People can get hung up on title and forget about the fact that there's a role to play here. And if you play that role, it doesn't really matter your job title or your designation within the organization or whatever. Yeah, I like that. Thank you, Kash. The next one says, can the Scrum Master or the Product Owner be the line manager? I love that. Who wants to try that one?
Yes, I would say so, because from the previous question, can you combine any two roles as a Scrum personnel?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, considering that the Scrum Master is not particularly fixated on on the role he's trying to play, he can have other roles that he can play carry out as well. So that's I think. Yeah, he can also be the line manager.
Absolutely. There's some school of thought though on line management that sometimes when there is, for example, that there's somebody who is working in the team who is very heavily invested in hierarchy or titles, and they can literally just enforce their titles on the team in a way that, or their office on the team in a way that the team kind of feel less empowered. In those kind of scenarios, is not usually recommended that a Scrum Master will not be the line manager, because then it becomes like whatever I say is what you will do. You have no voice to question or challenge my thoughts, because that I could actually reflect my disgruntled whatever against you in your appraisal or in your salary. Does that make sense? So there's scenarios, there's school of thought that kind of say, well, and I think by and large there's some element of truth in that, because you want an environment where people are very relaxed and able to express themselves regardless of who is listening or who is in the room. But we can't forget the fact that there are organizations and scenarios where people, emotions would fly in and come, I feel bad that came through, maybe that should have come through as a one-to-one. So it's about finding that balance. But yes, you're right. The Scrum Master PO can be line manager, and yeah, it doesn't really matter the title. Let's go to the fourth one. Can you have team leads in Scrum?
I'd say not really. It's a bit of a redundant position because everybody's self-organizing, and I mean, people can assume kind of leadership roles in different aspects, but assigning a whole lead role, doesn't really fit.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sometime, depending on where you find yourself, you find that you find that when you have team leads, the complexity between I'm a team lead and you should listen to what I say, just similar to what we said before, begins to not kind of slip into the self-organizing part of the team, and you realize that people kind of just say, well, whatever you say, just do it. And you come to planning or you come to retro, I'm like, oh yeah, whatever this person says, I don't want to say anything that would upset this person because it's a team lead, and you see what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of redundant. So I wouldn't recommend it. And yeah, you're right. I wouldn't recommend it. Everybody's on the same level playing field. Ultimately, the product owner is responsible, and the entire team is responsible for whatever actions they take as a team, not as individuals. Where do architects fit in Scrum? That's a simple one. where do architects fit? You know, we have three roles. Don't forget, Scrum Master, Product Owner, and the Scrum team. So where would an architect fit, like a technical architect or a solution architect? Anyone?
Does this go back to your thing about titles and roles?
Mm-hmm.
Technical architect is a title.
Yeah.
Product owner, Scrum Master, Scrum team, those are all roles.
Yeah.
So actually the technical architect could be any of those things?
Yes, it could be any of those. Then most importantly, if you have title, it could be in the Scrum team if somebody else is wearing the hat of the production or Scrum Master. Yeah, absolutely. The same thing, the last question. So let's go to the other questions here. This is a bit more interesting ones. Whose job is it to estimate the size of items on the product backlog? Whose job is it? I've got SM, which is Scrum Master, Product Owner, or team.
I'd say product owner.
Okay, why do you say that?
I feel like in terms of like when I was looking at studying and everything, I feel like the product owner is like more about coordinating. I know the Scrum Master is a coordinator as well, but they're both coordinating, but I feel like the product owner is like above the Scrum Master, so I'd say the product owner.
Yeah, okay. The answer actually is the team. Yeah, I tell you why. Because the product owner does not necessarily have to understand the complexities or the technical implementation or the details of things on the product backlog. The product backlog is your list of all the things that needs to be done in order to build a product or a service or to achieve a goal. Yeah. The product owner, however, is, like you said, is ultimately responsible or not responsible, accountable. That's the right word. The product owner is accountable for the work that the team is doing. But at the same time, the product owner needs to be able to trust the judgment of the team to say, well, Mr. Product Owner, this work is going to take 5 hours to complete. There's nothing you can do about it. And he just needs to accept that, yeah, and work with that, okay? But he might not necessarily be able to go in there and say, oh, this developer will do 1 hour, this tester will do 2 hours, this BA will do 1 hour, and then our user researcher will do 3 hours, our designer will do, because he's not a designer, he's not a developer, he's not a tester, he's basically just accountable for the work. Does that make sense? So the team should produce the estimate for the size of the things in the backlog. Does that make sense? Can I move on?
Yeah, that
makes sense.
Next one. Whose job is it to participate in planning, sprint planning? Easy. This should be very easy.
Was it everyone?
Everyone, yes. It's a very tricky question because I think there should be an option for everyone in there. Whose job is it to update the release burn down chart? Yeah, this one, we don't do release burn down chart yet, but I think I showed you what it looks like earlier. But basically, it's saying we have 50 or 100 items in our backlog, tickets or Jira tickets or stories or Trello cards that we need to accomplish. And someone needs to show us that, okay, out of 50 by week 3, we have done 10, and kind of just burn it down in that order. Okay. Whose job is it to ensure that the team is following the Scrum practices? Any thoughts?
The Scrum Master.
Scrum Master. Yeah, to an extent, I agree. But again, in my opinion, I think it's the team. What don't you think everybody should actually be involved in? Well, yeah, the Scrum Master may be more like facilitating, arranging meetings and coordinating things around, which makes sense. But I think it's everybody's responsibility to make sure that they're following the practices. But yes, you're not wrong, Scrum Master. Whose job is it to update the sprint backlog when tasks are done?
The team.
The team, yeah?
Yep.
It should be a collective thing. But you realize that not many times it gets been done, it gets done by either the Scrum Master or it's the team, actually, it's the team. So you update when you comment on your task or your tickets, and you just the way you comment on your work that maybe you're posting to, or you're writing a sales article or a press release or whatever it is you're doing. You then say this is done, and then you move it to done. Is a team effort. Okay, I'll just do 2 more and then I'll stop. Whose job is it to ensure that impediments are removed? This is an interesting one. Do you know what? Does everybody know what impediments mean? Blockers, yeah?
Isn't it the Scrum Master?
Yes.
I think it's
Is a Scrum Master. And like I said, it's just, this is now the role versus title again. It could be anybody, but really is a Scrum Master role to ensure that people are unblocked. I find myself doing that a lot, and sometimes I wear the hat of Scrum Master, sometimes I wear the product owner hat, and I've seen other people do the same in the team, like, you know, unblocking people and making sure they can progress. Okay, let's do 1 more. Whose job is it to manage the budget and return on investment of the product? So simple. Thoughts?
Product owner.
Yeah. This, you know what? One of the my coaches I follow when it comes to Scrum and Agile and stuff. His name is Mike Kahn. He describes the product owner as the single ringable neck. I think that's unfair, but it's a bit harsh, but I think it's the truth because of the accountability, responsibility of the product owner. Yeah. But yeah, so let's stop there for today.